media who are choking on sanctimony and lacking in compassion. So I thought I'd go around the panel and see what you think of this. Mary Margaret, what are your thoughts?
It's interesting, isn't it? Chimamanda, I know her because her essay why everyone should be a feminist was popularized in Beyonce's song Flawless. So I
really?
always
Didn't
knew
know
that
that.
essay
Yeah.
because of that. And then she sort of fell off my radar until today. The root of this issue comes down to comments that Chimamanda made that are transphobic. She went against the narrative that trans women are women. So I think the reason that these writers are taking an issue is very valid. The essay itself is interesting. I think the point about sanctimony online and virtue signalling is salient.
True? Is it?
To a degree, but it's interesting because Chimamanda is, to an extent, doing it herself in the essay, I think.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, Ben.
I mean, you do get into these excruciating back and forths at each point about who's trying to suppress whose free speech and who's being too indignant and self-righteous. So you don't really get very far with it, which I think is pretty illustrative itself.
That's us, Mary Margaret. Thank you so much. You've been wonderful. Mary Margaret Slack on the panel and Ben Thomas. Kia ora. Wonderful. I'm Wallace Chapman. I'm back tomorrow, Friday. See you then.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei. Roll up for the COVID vaccine rollout. The Prime Minister breaks down the timetable for the general population. You'll be called according to age. 60 plus from the end of July. Under 35s are the last cab off the rank. The bulk of our Pfizer jabs are expected to arrive by the end of October, and the goal's still to get done sometime in December. So what does that mean for our border restrictions? Auckland businesses trading alongside a giant city rail trench say they could fall into a financial hole before the project's finished. Taranaki's famous wind wand is magicked back into position. And a warning, watch out for bad eggs. You can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. Most people under 35 will have to wait until October to get vaccinated against COVID. The government has announced its priorities for the final stage of the rollout, and age will be the criteria. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
Until now, the 2 million people under 65 with no other COVID risks have only known their turn is due at the end of July. In fact, it'll only be those over 60 who'll qualify for a jab then, with those over 55 getting their turn from August the 11th. After that, the timing is looser because the vaccine supply is less certain. But roughly speaking, those over 45 will be up in mid to late August, those over 35 in September, and everyone else in October. There'll be variations depending on where people live.
Community members on Stewart Island are being tested after a child received an indeterminate test result for COVID-19. A local childcare centre is being closed for the rest of the week, and possible local contacts are being asked to isolate. Director General of Health Dr Ashley Bloomfield says health authorities are investigating the potential case, but say it's most likely the person is not infected.
We were notified yesterday of rather than calling it a case, a very weak positive result actually in a child, which was a bit puzzling, and this came as a result of pre-departure testing ahead of overseas travel by testing of a family. All the other family members tested negative, and repeat testing of both the child and other family members was negative as well.
Ashley Bloomfield says further results are due later today. Team New Zealand sailors Baird Chuk and Peter Burling remain hopeful the next America's Cup might still be hosted on New Zealand waters. Key members of the crew, which defended the Cup earlier this year, Burling and Chuk, may not get the chance to repeat that feat after the syndicate turned down the government's $100 million offer to keep the regatta here. But the reigning Olympic 49er champions aren't yet ruling out the next defence being back in Auckland. Chuk says their first choice is to have the regatta here, but they're aware of the challenges that come with that in the current climate. The developers of a controversial marina on Waiheke Island say the project has been authorised by the Environment Court. 3 protesters who believe the development puts little blue penguins at risk have been arrested for trespass. Te Aorewa Rolleston reports.
Kennedy Point Boat Harbour Director Kit Littlejohn says the work at the marina poses no risk to the penguins or korora, which live there. He says the developers have complied with all construction standards. The Pūtiki Point site has been occupied for the past 4 months by opponents of the project. They say workers with the digger began removing rocks today in order to drill into the seabed. Mr Littlejohn says he's certain no harm will come to the penguins.
The ACT Party has dismissed the stronger-than-expected bounce in GDP as a short-term sugar hit. The economy has avoided a slip back into recession with a 1.6% surge in GDP in the first 3 months of the year, 3 times stronger than forecast. But ACT leader David Seymour says history will show it to be a blip.
If people can't travel and monetary policy is loose, house prices rise 20% and people go out and spend on their homes. But I think anyone who thinks hard about what sort of economy we want can see that's not a sustainable strategy for New Zealanders to become wealthier in the long term.
David Seymour says the Zero Carbon Act and fair pay agreements will also act as a handbrake. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. The Black Caps have given a further hint that spinner Ajaz Patel may have played his way in the starting lineup for the World Test Championship final against India starting at Southampton tomorrow. Patel has played just 9 tests, with all of his 26 wickets coming in the 6 tests he's played overseas. The 32-year-old bolted into contention by taking 4 wickets in the second test win over England. New Zealand traditionally pick pace for tests, but Black Caps bowling coach Shane Jurgensen says the English conditions certainly suit Patel.
We may need to look at other options to consider taking wickets. England does create opportunities for things to change very quickly. So in Edgbaston, there was a couple of really hot days which made that wicket play into Ajaz's hand. He just bowled beautifully.
Despite missing out on the Tokyo Games, Olympic silver medalist Sarah Walker isn't ready to give up on BMX. National champion Rebecca Petch has claimed New Zealand's only BMX spot for Tokyo. Walker missed the 2016 Rio Games through injury, having won a silver medal at the London Olympics in 2012. She's now contemplating her competitive future, as she'd be 36 by the time the Paris Olympics come around. The All Blacks back Geordie Barrett will stay with the Hurricanes next season. Barrett, who was off contract with New Zealand Rugby at the end of 2022, had an option to join the Blues and brother Bowden next year, but he's sticking with the Hurricanes. That's the news.
Wellington sets its sights on car-free boulevards.
It's going to affect our business quite a bit, since it's going to lower the amount of customers coming in.
America's Cup bargaining leaves a sour taste.
A lot of us will feel a little bit betrayed, like they've gone for the dollars and the fame.
And the fight to reunite families torn apart by COVID-19.
To actually see them will really be like your biggest dream has come true.
Close to home, Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country. Showers easing today, clearing tomorrow. Areas of fog inland overnight. Rain late tomorrow for Northland and Taranaki, with possible thunderstorms for Northland. Bay of Plenty, partly cloudy. Showers in the west clearing this afternoon and evening. Fog inland overnight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay fine, apart from showers about the ranges tonight. Cloudier with isolated showers about Hawke's Bay tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington also wide upper, partly cloudy with occasional showers clearing later tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, showers about Buller, spreading elsewhere this evening, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland mainly fine, however a few showers about northern Westland until tonight. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, showers with possible hail. Snow lowering to 800 metres by the evening, gradually clearing tomorrow, but remaining cloudy about Canterbury, Chatham Island showers. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, e ho tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Group 4, get in line. There's a vaccine coming to a clinic near you. A broad timeline's been released for how the rollout will work for the general population. The 2 million people who make up Group 4, the bulk of the rollout will be prioritised by age. But the timetable is loose because exact vaccine supplies are not certain beyond August. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
The vaccination rollout started slowly, targeting those most at risk first, including over 65s, border workers and their families. But from next month, it's set to open to the general population. As Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern explains, age will determine when people can get a jab.
Vaccination cohorting is based on those who are at greatest risk from serious illness if they contract COVID-19. So that's a very simple reason, and you'll see we're not alone in choosing to roll out in this way. It's exactly what the likes of the United Kingdom, Australia and others are doing.
Group 4 is set to begin at the end of July with those over 60. Over 55s will be up from August the 11th. After that, things get a little less specific because the current supply guarantee from Pfizer runs out and the government only gets 4 weeks' notice of what's coming next. But roughly, those over 45 should get the call mid to late August, over 35s from September and everyone else from October.
But the reason we haven't given more specificity is because we will still be working to a 4-week notice program. So broadly speaking, we're confident about those dates, but any more detail than that, we are going to have to wait for that 4 weeks notice.
Vaccinating 2 million people in the second half of the year is a huge scale-up. Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says there are between 80 to 150 vaccination sites working on any given day now. That will eventually be 850 to meet demand.
We're now preparing to ramp up to around 350,000 doses a week, and on some days at the peak of the delivery, that will be up to 70,000 doses a day.
And there'll be some mass vaccination events at places like stadiums. The Prime Minister gave few details but says planning is well underway.
We will be targeting those workplaces and those mass vaccination events towards those communities that it's really critical we reach. That will help us overcome some equity issues. We particularly need to make sure that our Māori and Pacifica population, where there are in some cases greater risk, are being vaccinated in a timely way, and also our rural and isolated populations.
Dr Bloomfield says 17 new super cold freezers are about to arrive, which can hold 4 million doses of vaccine between them. And a new southern distribution centre is being opened in Christchurch.
As large consignments of the vaccine arrive, and they will be able to fly in directly to both Auckland and Christchurch.
Brian Betty from the College of GPs says family doctors are going to be vital to the rollout and are ready to play their part.
This is a big step up to Sequence 4 is about 2 million people that need to be vaccinated. It's really important that general practice is involved. We anticipate about 40% of general practices around the country will, at the end of the day, be involved in giving COVID vaccine.
Details have also been revealed about how to book, with people able to secure times for both doses of the vaccine with one visit to a new website that'll be rolled out in the next few weeks.
It is almost 11 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia mau tonu mai will have the Prime Minister on the vaccine rollout plan and what needs to happen before the borders reopen. Quick bit of traffic now on State Highway 2 in Mount Maunganui. There's congestion southbound approaching Girvan Road because of an earlier crash. Now, Waka Kotahi is asking people to pass the scene with care. Out of pocket, Auckland businesses trading alongside a giant City Rail Link trench say they may fold before the project's complete. The Albert Street business owners protested outside the Auckland Council building today, demanding compensation for interruption caused by the $4.4 billion underground rail project. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
For years, this has been Roma Bloom's reality, trying to turn a profit while effectively invisible to would-be buyers. Shabana Ranchoji and Jagdish Naran are struggling to make a living next to a giant City Rail Link trench that's cut through the heart of Albert Street. Huge barriers shield their business from the public eye. Some days they're forced to throw out $1,000 worth of unsold flowers.
Oh no, but they did say it'll be minimal effect from the get-go on the businesses. And government was listening to this. Minimal effect. Do you believe this is minimal effect on the businesses? And now that they're aware of it, what are they doing? We need a solution, a proper solution, a solution that actually addresses the extreme hardship we have suffered and will continue to suffer as a result of this project.
Anger is boiling over among business owners here. The tale of woe is shared by many. Some have sold and moved on, some have cut back hours, while others have folded altogether. And things are about to get much, much worse for the likes of Roma Blooms with the imminent 2-year closure of the Albert Victoria Street intersection just outside its front door from June 30. That will completely barricade Shabana Ranchoji's flower shop from view.
We have got stock that we have to sell, and it's a perishable stock. We have to bear the brunt of that loss because CRL were not good communicators throughout this project with us.
The works along Albert Street won't be finished until the end of 2023, nearly 8 years after work started outside the front of Roma Blooms. Businesses trading near this massive trench on Albert Street say they've been offered things like social media training and lessons on how to run a business. But there's been very little of what they actually need. City Rail Link says it has helped, though, by providing rent relief for businesses affected by construction delays at the lower end of Albert Street. Claims to date total more than $617,000. But Shabana Ranchoji says her business has not received any financial help, and a package for just the delays is far from good enough.
The real hardship is what is happening whilst this project is having to do the work to build the tunnel. That's the hardship that we are facing.
Craig Presland is Chief Operating Officer at Evolve Education Group.
Be fair, be reasonable, show leadership. Think about the small guys as well. You know, this is a very big project for Auckland City, we know that, but what about the small businesses and the impact?
Evolve isn't a small company, but Mr. Presland says its Lollipops Childhood Centre on Albert Street is racking up huge losses because of the City Rail Link. The space it leases in a largely abandoned building on Albert Street is costing about $500,000 a year.
Once over 100 children attending 5 years ago, now down to under 50. Access into and out of the building, very difficult for parents now dropping off their children in the morning and picking up in the afternoon. So we're seeking compensation. We're paying very expensive rent. There's been no rent relief from the landlord. And so we need compensation from the council or City Rail Link in order to remain commercially viable at this centre.
Heart of the City Chief Executive Viv Beck points out large-scale overseas projects have budgeted for compensation for businesses, pointing to Sydney's light rail project.
Sydney had a budget of 60 million. Seattle had a budget of 50 million 20 years ago. You know, we need to do these things right if we're doing these large-scale projects.
She says CRL's previous payments were for delays on the project's C2 contract for works on Lower Albert Street.
So these people affected by these works now and the upcoming intersection closure, they have nothing because City Rail Link has said it's only about delays. Now we're saying this is way more than delays. This is day-by-day impacts.
In a statement, CRL says it's not funded to provide compensation for disruption, and these decisions are for Auckland Council and the government. Transport Minister Michael Wood last week told Checkpoint he had asked officials to see if the initial compensation package could be extended to other businesses. In the meantime, these Albert Street businesses continue to count the losses.
If you're listening to that on radio, don't forget you can catch the video from our two Nicks. We'll put it up on our Facebook page. Homai o whakaaro, love to hear from you. You can send your feedback to 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. What do you think of the vaccine rollout that the Prime Minister has announced this afternoon? That is the timetable for the general Group 4 rollout. And also, if you're in the area of Albert Street, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast down there. How are you faring? Some more traffic news now on Auckland's southern motorway. There's been a breakdown which is blocking the right southbound lane just after the Papakura off-ramp. Now, emergency services are en route and motorists are being told to expect delays until it can be cleared. Wellington Council hopes getting cars off the Golden Mile will give it more shine. A car ban will come into place in 2024 for the route from Courtney Place to the Beehive, with the council saying it'll be better for the city, but it's certainly not without controversy. Our reporter Tom Kitchen and cameraman Dom Thomas went for a stroll along the mile to get a pulse of the city.
I'm here at Courtney Place, one end of the Golden Mile in Wellington. You can see these cars behind me. They're going to be gone to make way for bus and cycle lanes and pedestrian-friendly spaces.
The proposal has mixed reaction. Dave Woods calls it ridiculous.
If you look here during the day, you see all these tradies coming here. People eat here all day, you know. So they're just trying to ruin. It's typical council, very anti-business.
Eva Yoakum is all for it, if it's done right.
So if there's plans for good car parking around and there's enough access for disabled people, I think in time, I think it's a really good idea.
We're on the corner of Manners and Willis Street in central Wellington, and we can see the cars behind me here. Well, they're going to be gone under the plan. You can see this for lease sign here as well. And Matt McLaughlin of Hoff Hospitality fears there could be more of this along the Golden Mile if the plan goes ahead.
I'm pleased that some action has taken place and something's going to happen at least, and a decisive decision's been made, and we're on, roll the sleeves up and get on with it. I am very nervous. I'm very nervous for a lot of the retailers. I'm nervous for hospitality. I just think that it could go one way or the other. I don't know which way that's going to go though.
RTB's books owner Pippa Birch is not into the idea at all.
We have 5-minute parking directly outside the shop, so people are lugging in cartons of books and they have to find somewhere else to park. It's going to be a lot more difficult for them and for me bringing things into and out of the shop.
Wellington City Councillor Tamitha Paul is a big supporter of the move. She says it will encourage people to look for other ways of getting around.
The way that Wellington will be moving is that more people will be able to be moving freely through the streets. So people obviously walking, but also people in wheelchairs and also people on bikes, on e-scooters, people with prams. So it's about different modes of function and about different ways that people can move about the city.
She says people need to have a look at the evidence that shows it works in cities around the world.
I think we need to actually just get it going and show people in practice that it works and just rip the Band-Aid off.
Aaron Packard likes it from a walker's perspective.
Oh, personally, I think it's fantastic from the pedestrian's perspective. I do feel for the shops, they've got some serious issues, and so I hope that, as the council rolls it out, they can work with the shops to find solutions for their concerns.
We've made it to Lambton Quay, the other end of the Golden Mile. On our walk today, we've found that the proposal to scrap cars from this end of Wellington is dividing locals. But only time will tell whether it will indeed get Wellington moving.
It's 5:20, and if you're listening to that, you can watch Tom and Dom's story on our webpage. Peter Burling and Blair Tuke remain hopeful the next America's Cup may still be hosted on New Zealand waters. The Team New Zealand sailors say they're keen to defend the old mug in Auckland, but a defence of a different kind is the most pressing priority for the reigning Olympic champions. Our reporter Clay Wilson and cameraman Nathan McKinnon caught up with them today.
I don't think you can think of much more special environment than this with, over a couple of thousand of boats out every day, it seemed. The village absolutely packed, people everywhere. And to do something like this on home water is something that I think our whole team's incredibly proud of.
Defending the America's Cup in New Zealand meant a lot to Peter Burling and Blair Tuke. But they might not get the chance to repeat the feat next time around, after Team New Zealand turned down the government's $100 million offer to keep the cup here. Tuke says it's a challenging situation.
We love the time sailing here and the cup and seeing how Kiwis enjoyed it, and I know everyone's been working incredibly hard to try and keep it here again. That would be the first choice, but we're also very aware of how challenging it is to hold an event like the America's Cup in these times.
Team New Zealand boss Grant Dalton and America's Cup Minister Stuart Nash insist all is not lost. Burling says they're not giving up hope either.
Everyone loved competing here. We're all incredibly proud Kiwis. Speaking for everyone on Team New Zealand, we love the support we get from the country, and it's something that we'll do everything we can to have it here. But obviously, Grant and all of the team at the event are got to make things work, and that's what they're trying to do.
For now, a different kind of defence is in focus.
Having gone almost immediately from the Cup Regatta to their new Sail GP team, the pair shifted gears again last month. With less than 6 weeks remaining until the reigning Olympic champions line up for race 1 in Tokyo, Duke says it was crucial to be back in the 49er in plenty of time.
Although we've had a bit of practice over the years to jumping back in and out, it still takes a bit of time for us to get that real intuition and timing back between each other.
Their final push towards the Games began with a recent 3-week stint in northern Spain. Burling and Tuke finished on top in one of the 2 practice regattas they competed in, and the former says their time in Santander proved very fruitful.
And we've got a great variety of conditions there, but also got the opportunity to check in with the European fleet. So there were a lot of, I think maybe 6 or 7 out of the top 10 at the last World Championships there in Spain training with us, and it was really good to be able to check in with them.
Reassured they're right up to speed with their rivals, their last month of preparation will be spent on Australia's Sunshine Coast. With 7 Australian boats and 4 other Kiwi boats set to join them, Duke says their time in Mooloolaba should tick several boxes.
Bigger fleet size is important, but also the conditions that Mooloolaba will provide, it's going to be quite good. Sort of a bit of an ocean swell, pretty open there, but also slightly warmer than the middle of winter here in New Zealand. So obviously the heat factor up in Japan is going to be a big deal for all athletes.
Burling and Tuke will have around 10 days to get used to that Japanese heat before their Games campaign gets underway in Inoshima on July 27.
And it's a video bonanza tonight, so if you want to catch Nathan and Clay's piece online, we'll put it up there so you can see the footage. A warning to consumers, watch out for bad eggs. Like actual bad eggs. The Ministry for Primary Industries has slapped a ban on a North Island egg farm, meaning it can't shift hens or eggs off the property after the farm tested positive for a nasty strain of salmonella. Now, that's the bacteria that can cause diarrhoea, vomiting and fever, and can be particularly serious for the elderly or frail and pregnant women. The Ministry says more than a dozen farms connected to one particular hatchery in Auckland have been identified as high risk following an investigation, but it can't specifically identify the eggs that could be of concern because they are marketed under multiple brands. Dr. Paul Danstead from New Zealand Food Safety has a crack at explaining.
The chickens on this farm are layer hens, so they're producing eggs. At their end of their life, they may go into the meat chain, or they might go into pet food or other avenues. But our real interest at this point in time is stopping the eggs moving on. But if making sure that if there were infected hens, they wouldn't go onto another farm and infect another farm.
Are there potentially eggs from this farm on supermarket shelves?
Look, we've done lots of testing of eggs and we haven't found any of this salmonella in eggs. But our concern is that it's possible, it could be there, and it can actually grow and multiply, in people's homes. So we're recommending that, people refrigerate their eggs at home and cook them thoroughly and so on. And also that general sort of food safety, hygiene type stuff we would, recommend in the home.
Appreciate that, but while you've put a no movement notice on this farm, have eggs from this property already gone to supermarket or shop shelves? Are they there and could people be buying them?
So look, there have been eggs moving from this farmer before the notice. They tend to move through the supply chain pretty quickly. So while there won't be any in the supply chain, it is possible that there are some of these eggs in people's homes. So what we're recommending is, cook your eggs. Refrigerate them if you've got them in the home, but also pay attention to the date marking. Don't keep eggs beyond their expiry date.
Why not just tell consumers what farm they've come from?
So if there is a farm or a product that's readily identifiable, you've got a particular brand or a particular date, that kind of information we can and will provide to consumers, and we've got a list of those sorts of things on our website right now. In this particular case, the product isn't identified from this particular farm, so it's not particularly helpful information.
So the eggs feed into other brands, do they?
Yes, they do.
So is it a home brand or a supermarket particular brand?
So this particular farm supplies a number of brands.
Do you know how many, Paul?
No, I don't. Sorry,
So they could be everywhere.
So look, what we're putting out a general advice, right? Because we've found it on this particular farm. We've also found it on 2 other farms that have controls in place. While we haven't found it in a widespread sense, our concern is that, it could potentially be out there. So we're putting controls on farms. We're putting controls, sampling and testing and movement controls as well. But we think now's a good time to be providing information to consumers as well, particularly if you've got immunocompromised or particularly young people, pregnant, elderly and frail. There are things you can do to, protect yourself in the home.
So there are 2 other farms that you identified issues with, right? Found the same kind of strain of salmonella. Did you have notices put on those farms too, stopping movement?
Yes, so a couple of weeks ago we issued notices of directions on 2 other farms and that's already been reported publicly.
Are they owned by the same people, all 3 properties?
The farms in question are independent.
So they are 3 independent farms not connected to each other in any way?
We initially have traced back product in March this year to one hatchery in Auckland, and so tracing back from there we've been tracing forward, and that's how we've found these other farms.
Just to be clear, all of these properties are in some way connected?
All the properties we've found so far, we can trace back to the hatchery in North Auckland.
So, are you saying that birds from one hatchery have potentially spread the salmonella across multiple properties? Is that the working theory?
Our working assumption is that the hatchery in Auckland has had an infection, and those birds have moved to a number of different farms, and that's moved through the supply chain. That's what we're working on, and that's how we're tracing product.
So when you say through the supply chain, you're talking about 18 plus potential properties?
When we first traced back to the hatchery in Auckland, we traced forward to a total of 64 farms. There were 18 of those that were high risk because they were in the risk period, weren't doing sampling and testing of their own, and we were linked back to potentially infected flocks. So of those 18, we've put additional sampling and testing in place, and as a result of that sampling and testing, we put movement controls of 2 of them.
I'm not wanting to be alarmist, Paul, but you're talking about potentially, hundreds, thousands of chickens and goodness knows how many eggs here, aren't you?
Look, there are lots of chickens in New Zealand. At any given day, there will be about 4 million. But of the farms that you have identified as high risk, sorry to interrupt, but you have identified, you said, 18 farms as high risk. You have put non-movement notices on ones. You have indicated that they are all interconnected because of the transportation of the hens. So, you could be talking thousands of eggs and thousands of birds? In New Zealand, we have about 170 layer farms. Of them, there were 64 that we initially looked at. There are 18 that are the highest priority, and we've put movement controls on 2 of them, and now we've put movement controls on a 3rd farm. So it does seem to be relatively well contained, but we're going to continue investigating this. We're going to continue looking broader, but at this point in time, there are 3 farms under control.
So, again, how many chickens and how many eggs are we talking here?
So that would really be a question for the industry. Each farm is a legal entity, and we deal with them as the legal entities rather than the number of chickens and eggs, etc.
And that is Dr. Paul Danstead. Now, to recap with some egg pointers that will help you keep healthy. Keep your eggs in the fridge. Cook them till the whites are firm and that the yolks have thickened. Now, wash your hands after handling them all the time. And don't use the ones with chicken poo or dirt on them. You need to wash them off first. And the ones with cracks in them, there always seems to be one in every packet. Don't eat that one. Throw it away. And don't eat them raw. If you are frail or ill, don't feed them to anyone under the age of 2. E te iwi e haere ake nei e a checkpoint, the Prime Minister on what needs to happen before the borders can reopen. A COVID testing team hits Stewart Island after a child returns a week positive. And run like a girl? Why are there different distances for boys and girls in high school cross countries? Homai o whakaro, love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme tonight. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Love your thoughts on the CRL in Auckland, the vaccine rollout, and also what you might have just heard about eggs. It is time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Most people under 35 will have to wait until October to get vaccinated against COVID. The government has announced its priorities for the final stage of the rollout, and age will be the criteria. Those over 60 will qualify for a jab at the end of July, with those over 55 getting their turn from August the 11th. Roughly speaking, those over 45 will be up in mid to late August, those over 35 in September, and everyone else in October. People on Rakiura, Stewart Island are being tested for COVID after a child returned a week positive result. The rest of the family returned negative tests, and so did the child when they retested. Health officials are waiting on more results in the hope it's either an historical infection or a false positive. A childcare centre has been closed for now. The developers of a controversial marina on Waiheke Island say the Environment Court has authorised the project. Opponents believe the development puts little blue penguins or korora at risk. 3 were arrested today for trespass after workers with a digger began removing rocks to drill into the seabed. Kennedy Point Boat Harbour Director Kit Littlejohn says the project has complied with all construction standards and he's certain no harm will come to the penguins. IHC has lodged a claim against the Education Ministry, saying it discriminates against children with disabilities in schools. The advocacy group lodged a statement with the Human Rights Tribunal today. Westpac's mobile banking app has suffered a major outage. A Westpac spokesperson confirmed the app went down just before 5 o'clock this evening, but isn't able to say what has caused the outage or when it will be restored. In the meantime, customers can still access their accounts on a desktop computer. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei, ko Nona Peltier joins us for business. Let's start with the ASB Bank. So it's going to repay customers nearly $9 million. That's a lot of coin for overcharging them fees.
Yeah, these were fees that had to do with early repayment adjustments. But they
on loans if you
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Mostly it was home loans, but it wasn't just home loans. There were also other types like business and rural and a few other types of loans. But basically the bank had overcharged but noticed it themselves and then began to correct it and also notified the Commerce Commission. Now this is pretty typical. This is what the Commerce Commission is hoping banks and businesses will do because they don't really have an audit in place to go checking. So they want banks to own up and and so they didn't get a fine, but they do definitely have to. They've apologized for their mistake. And that's the second time recently they made a mistake. A while back, not so long ago actually, there was another matter that they had to settle with the commission. It cost them $8.1 million in that case, and it was after failing to provide sufficient information about loans to their borrowers. So this is I talked to the commission today and I said, this seems to be like a recurring thing. We're getting all kinds of banks, self-reporting their misdeeds, so to speak, and then getting like, oh, well, here you are, fix it up, and then don't do it again. But then they do it again. So what's up? And the Commerce Commission said, well, this is how the system's supposed to work. They don't have an auditing position, so they want banks to, if they do see that they've made a mistake, to correct it and to put in place processes so it doesn't happen again. And if it does happen again, well, the Commerce Commission will take further action.
So bank complaints, how are they tracking then?
This is interesting. So you might recall earlier in June, the banking ombudsman said that customer complaints had fallen. But they weren't sure exactly why, because they have a new dashboard so that people can make complaints, but maybe it's because it's new, who knows. But the Consumer New Zealand, which is the magazine and so forth, they have a survey which shows that 1 in 5 people say they've had a problem with their bank in the past year. And guess who they're complaining about? ASB. and BNZ, saying they're not satisfied with the way that they handle their complaints. And but it wasn't all bad news. So let's see, 45% felt that their complaints had not been dealt with properly by ASB, and 47% by the Bank of New Zealand. They got the biggest black marks. But it wasn't all dark. I mean, the TSB Bank was rated number 1 for the second year in a row. More than 80% of their customers are very satisfied, and 9 out of 10 said they wouldn't consider switching their bank.
Do we know what the nature of the complaints were?
It's mostly communication.
Yeah,
It always sort of seems to be that things are not communicated properly, and people aren't satisfied with the way their complaints are being held or dealt with by these different organizations. And I mean, we see this a lot, but it's good that consumers are complaining, and certainly there's evidence that people are certainly not very happy with what their banks are doing.
What numbers do you bring us from the market, Nona?
Well, there's quite a lot of interesting numbers today. You might have heard it earlier that there was a very surprising, strong GDP number in the first quarter. The economy grew way more than what people expected, and that caused some changes in the value of our dollar. So overnight, it had fallen because the U.S. Federal Reserve, we talked about this earlier this week, finished their meeting and came back with an indication that they're going to be hiking interest rates much sooner than people were expecting. It kind of stunned the market and drove the US dollar up, which of course ours fell. But then with these very strong GDP numbers, we recovered quite a lot. So in the end, we were, basically steady, slightly down. We were at 70.9 US cents, which is really not that different from where we were before. 92.9 Australian, which is basically what it was yesterday, and 50.6 pence, same story there. Now, the NZX Top 50 Index, though, did drop, as did other Asian stocks, because inflation is the enemy of growing stocks. So basically, if inflation rates go up, equity markets tends to go down. So we fell nearly 1/3%, 40 points down to 12,541.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News. No vax, no visit. The Prime Minister's given the strongest indication yet that unvaccinated travellers won't be welcome in Aotearoa. At a press conference with Dr Ashley Bloomfield, she detailed the timeline for immunising the bulk of the population against COVID. People in priority group 4 are being clumped into smaller age-based groups. 60-plussers will go first. They'll be invited to book in the last days of July, and the last cab off the rank are the under 35s. They're expected to get the call up to book for a vaccination in October. The Prime Minister remains confident people who want a jab will get one before the end of the year.
Based on the delivery and the supply of vaccine, we're working towards it taking till the end of the year to vaccinate all those who are eligible. And that's simply because we are vaccinating as many people as we can based on the doses we have, but we won't be receiving all of our doses for everyone until the end of October. So that's why it'll take us through to the end of the year.
Is that later than expected, Prime Minister?
No, that's exactly as we've expected. You will have heard us talk consistently about the vaccination program taking us through to the end of the year.
The October delivery, though, for the bulk?
Oh, actually, that is a little bit earlier than perhaps we'd anticipated. But, of course, once you receive it, then you need to work through that distribution. So, broadly speaking, the year.
Given that your timetable to complete the bulk of vaccination is the end of the year, can you talk us through your timetable for adjusting the border restrictions?
Look, this is something that we continue to assess based on what we're seeing internationally, and helpfully, of course, there are some countries who are varying up their border restrictions, albeit they don't have the same approach to COVID as us, but they are varying up their border restrictions alongside their vaccination rollout. So that will give us a bit of an indication as to whether or not that can be done safely. I think what we can share for now, though, and we are asking our expert groups like Professor David Skeggs and his team to go away and consider what a vaccination rollout will mean for the way that we operate our borders in the future. So we're doing that work right now.
Have they given you a number, Prime Minister? Like, okay, 80% is the sweet spot for opening up for people from low-risk countries without MIQ?
So we have asked for some of that modelling to be done, and with different factors For instance, if you have pre-departure testing and arrival testing, how does that vary the way that you're able to work? And we expect some of that modelling to come through in the near future, and it's likely that that those who do the modelling will be sharing that directly. I think the most important 2 points that I would make, having a large proportion of our population vaccinated, as many people as possible who are eligible, gives us the greatest amount of freedom and opportunity. I think it's everyone's goal in New Zealand to live without a state of fear that we're going to have another lockdown. Now, that does not mean that we're going to have a situation where everyone will be vaccinated and the borders just one day will open. We will need to still have caution around our borders because of variants and because not every other country will be in the same position as us. But if we have as many as possible vaccinated, that reduces risk and it gives us a chance to change the way we do things at our border.
While you've given us an indicative timeframe for completing the vaccination in December, can you give us...
That's of course our plan. Yeah. Everyone has a role to play in that.
But can you also give us an indicative plan for announcing something around the border or give us an indication of, okay, we expect to be finished vaccinating by December, so in October we'll start telling you what we think about the border?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're working to. So we're doing the thinking... So we're doing the thinking now. Some of the modelling's being done now, and we're having some of our experts consider these questions now as well. Keeping in mind, you'll hear internationally that some of the thresholds people are talking about are still changing quite a bit, and so are some of the models at the border. So everyone is writing the rule book as we go. The difference for New Zealand is that we've got a different rule book to write. I think what everyone will want to do is maintain the flexibility we have. Once you get rid of an elimination strategy, or anyone chooses to get rid of an elimination strategy, it's very hard to come back to it. So for New Zealand, it's about how do we preserve our position whilst having a bit more freedom at the border. But I think the idea that any country in the world will suddenly turn off all of their measures at once, I don't think anyone's considering that.
Can you give me a definitive on whether you will expect people to be vaccinated in order to enter New Zealand?
That's not a decision that's being made as yet, but I was just recently looking at all of the border requirements globally. A large proportion of countries, particularly within the EU, are requiring vaccination.
Is that where you're leaning then?
Oh, look, I think New Zealanders would have an expectation that if they have made the effort to keep themselves safe by being vaccinated, that those who are wishing to visit New Zealand should show a sense of responsibility. And actually, it's becoming a global trend, so I think it would be very unusual if New Zealand didn't have some of those requirements. Keep in mind, it will hopefully give us more flexibility about the way we deal with managed isolation.
Dr. Bloomfield, the over 65s who are getting the call up now in Auckland, they're getting a text message which is telling them to go online. Is that what they're using to book their vaccination appointments?
Yeah, not yet.
Okay.
The Auckland Metro region is using the system it's had in place right from the start, and because they have many bookings already on there, it's going to be the one that we will migrate across to the new system after all the other DHBs are on, because there's a lot of data to migrate across.
How's it coping? Because we're getting a lot of feedback from listeners, texts and emails saying that it locks them out of their accounts, they can't get past go, and it's very complicated in terms of getting on there to book. How's it functioning?
I don't have the detail, but what I can say is every DHB has a call centre, most of them an arrangement with Healthline, Whakarongarau, to help people who are having trouble making bookings. I think the key thing I want to emphasise here is we have been really we've put a lot of focus on making sure our national booking system, when it comes online, has a lot of capacity, because it's great, there is a lot of interest, and we want to be able to cope with all that interest. But to back that up, there will also be an opportunity for people who either are not able to or don't want to book online, or who are having difficulties. They will be able to ring the call centre.
What's your confidence level around the Book My Vaccine's ability to handle the kind of influx you're going to get?
Yeah, we've got a high level of confidence in that. The core system on which it's based, A, is in the cloud, so there's enormous capacity there, but B, it has been also used essentially in California already, and has been used to roll out over 14 million vaccinations through that booking system. So we're confident that it will be able to cope with the demand.
Homai o whakaro, what do you think of the timeline for the rollout for the rest of the population? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can flick us an email. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the address. A lot of you already getting in touch. This listener, Jess from Napier, says, my 82-year-old father's booking for his first COVID jab today was cancelled this morning. So can we have faith in the news of a rough rollout schedule? Interesting to note that it is looser from over 55s onwards. The Prime Minister has said it's an indicative timeline for those groups because they can't be sure about the quantity and arrival times for the Pfizer vaccine. Mary says, I'm 70, my partner is 85. We're both on high blood pressure pills. We live in Wellington and have not been contacted. When can we expect to receive a COVID vaccination? That's interesting. Another person says, what about progress with vaccination group 3? Seems to be lagging badly with info very hard to get, yet the plan is released for Group 4. And this person says, rollout? What rollout? Here in Tawa, Wellington, no GPs can do vaccines. No one I know has had any contact for vaccine except medical or frontline workers. Even aged 90 plus, no vaccine yet, no appointment. Some have registered online, but no response yet. Well, do keep your feedback coming. Interested in your experiences, text us on 2101. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hey, Muriaki in a pita kōrero after the news at 6, COVID testing on Rakiura, Stewart Island, after a child returns a weak positive result. Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin may have talked for 4 hours overnight in Geneva, but little progress seems to have been made. The US and Russian leaders talked about cyber security, nuclear arms and the fate of the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, among other topics. Before the summit, both sides said relations were at rock bottom. The BBC's John Sopel has this report on where things may stand now.
Best wishes and goodbye.
And with those words, the Swiss president left them to it. There was little in the way of theatrics or fanfare, and the body language suggested a good deal of wariness on both sides, as the US and Russian presidents shook hands on the portico of this handsome 18th century villa overlooking Lake Geneva.
I'm not sure how this is working.
In the library, they sat somewhat awkwardly. A reporter asked the Russian president whether he feared the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. No comment. The American president was asked whether he trusted Vladimir Putin. He appeared to nod. He says there are a lot of issues that require the highest level of meeting. The US president concurred.
As I said outside, I think it's always better to meet face to face.
And then just shy of 4 hours after walking in, Joe Biden was walking out. The talks had not lasted as long as had been predicted. But if the talks had gone badly, President Putin was playing it down.
Both sides expressed their intention to understand each other and to seek common ground. Talks were quite constructive.
President of the United States. Then it was the American president's turn, once the aviators had come off.
Been a long day for y'all.
He said he'd given Vladimir Putin a blunt message.
I made it clear that we will not tolerate attempts to violate our democratic sovereignty or destabilize our democratic elections, and we would respond. The bottom line is, I told President Putin that we need to have some basic rules of the road.
And he said he was satisfied with what had been achieved.
It was important to meet in person, so there can be no mistake about or misrepresentations about what I wanted to communicate. I did what I came to do.
This was more clear the air than new dawn. The Americans had set the bar low for this encounter, and on that basis, it met expectations.
It's cross-country season for schools, but for seniors, boys are still crossing more country than girls. It's an age-old, out-of-date tradition that's raised the ire of Marlborough running coach Mark Grammer. The boys run 6Ks while the girls run 4. You might ask why. I certainly did.
Once kids get to year 9, so third form in the old money, they run the same distance, which is 3K. Which is kind of odd because then there's another 2 age groups above that, and the distances separate the boys from the girls until they get to sort of under 19 level, which is that last couple of years at school where the boys run, let's say, 6Ks and the girls 4Ks. I imagine there's some regional differences, but that's roughly correct.
Why do the boys run 6Ks and the girls only run 4?
It's a bit bizarre that we're even having this discussion in this century. I imagine that this was decided by men 100 years ago, back in the days when women were too frail and perhaps they would faint if they ran further than 4 kilometres. I don't know, but there seems to be an incredible amount of vested interest in keeping it the way it's always been, including from women and girls, actually.
So why? Why do people have a vested interest in keeping these distances, different?
That's an interesting issue. Why would they? To me, it doesn't seem to be an argument worth having. I mean, we had these arguments in the last 100 years. It's not exactly a suffragette issue, is it? I'm in my 50s now, and I assume these arguments had been won in the last few decades or decades ago. But when you turn up to a regional cross-country as a kid or a national cross-country, you will run a different distance if you are a boy, almost signalling to everybody that the boys' event or the men's event is the main event. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what do you think this actually says to young women and girls?
I have my personal view, which I'll get to, but I think you'll find a lot of girls who compete at this level actually don't mind. It's so ingrained with them that that's the way it's always been, that's the way it shall always be, and they're okay. If you say to them, do you want to run 4Ks or 6Ks, what would you say? Do I really want to sustain the pain for another 2 kilometres?
You say it seems strange to be having this conversation now, right? But what are the barriers that still exist for young women here in terms of participating in sport? What are we chucking in front of them every day that makes it harder?
I think there are still some pervasive attitudes amongst people that run sport. I think they exist in their parents as well. I experience pushback from parents who say, "Oh no, such and such is tired today," or "Such and such can't do too much sport," and most of it's nonsense. Most of it's just this kind of overlaying the day that you've had on your kid's day, which you've got to be aware of it as an adult. Kids have a lot more energy and recover quicker and can handle a lot more than we as adults think they can handle.
So in terms of setting the distance, who is ultimately responsible for that? Who makes that final decision?
I guess at secondary schools level, it's the National Secondary Schools Cross-Country, or the National Secondary School Sports Council would do that. And I imagine they know that the issue is a bit of a hornet's nest, because this won't be the first time it's come up. It would have been debated for decades, I would expect.
Would you like to see this changed?
Oh, absolutely. It's just a no-brainer for me. It's one of those, just get on with it. Someone has to be the adult in the room and do the right thing.
Any faith that it will be changed?
The only way that it can change is if the girls just stop turning up. We've got the local girls' college sends their girls to the regional cross-country every year quite happily to run a shorter distance. And I look at that and I go, that's just another way of signalling. The point is that if you signal to one girl at these events, even just subconsciously, that she's not good enough, that's a good enough reason for me to change it.
So are you suggesting that the girls maybe boycott it until they get an equal distance race?
I would. If I was the teacher in charge, I would be saying, nah, not going. And that's what their parents should be saying as well. It's just ridiculous to have this discussion. And, we're talking about something from a bygone era, bygone century even.
And that is running coach Mark Grammer. It is 5 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Plymouth has welcomed back one of its most notable landmarks today, dangling from a helicopter that whirred across the town. The 48-metre Len Lai Windwand sculpture was reinstalled on the coastal walkway. It was returning from a 10-yearly maintenance overhaul. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin went to take a look.
That's the distinctive sound of an Iroquois helicopter hauling the Windwand from New Plymouth's north and delicately placing it on the coastal walkway. Installed to coincide with the new millennium, the fiberglass pole with its perspex bulb on the end has been missing from the Pukeariki landing since March. Pace Engineering Project Manager Warren Osborne explains it's been getting some TLC.
Probably unlike previous refurbishments, we've stripped the whole of the paint coating back to the fiberglass layers, and we've recoated from there. We've put a new clear sphere up the top. There's a new red sphere inside the clear sphere and a new LED light.
He says reinstalling the Windwan in its housing was a cinch.
In the first instance, we brought it in by helicopter off the water, laid it down on the grass verge, and we transferred the rigging from the helicopter to the crane. So the crane's lifted it up in a vertical position, and by the very narrowest of margins has lowered it down carefully through the bearing and into the socket down below.
Dave Beck is chief pilot at Beck Helicopters. He says moving Windwans comes with a little bit of anxiety.
If you've done a lot of lifting, it's not too bad. You've just got to be careful to make sure you don't bend it or, it bends a little bit by itself, doesn't it? Make sure you don't break it when you're lifting it or putting it down.
The wand's flexibility is the problem.
Because it's designed to bend, it's not like moving a power pole or something, which is a solid object. You can put the pole where you want. Of course, with the Windwan, you hold the helicopter still, and the wand down the bottom, it just wanders around all over the place, which just makes it hard to put it precisely on the ground.
Down on the coastal walkway, most people were glad to see the Windwan back.
I didn't know it went out. No, seriously. So I didn't even notice. That's a bad thing, because I think it's great.
It's great. Yeah, it looks good.
Pretty excited, actually. We saw it being put back in this morning, so that was pretty cool.
No, I didn't notice it. Normally I look and it's never there.
I didn't notice it had been gone, but we were just showing Edie it.
Definitely noticed it was gone because I often come down here. I love it back. I think it's cool.
Along with its once-a-decade overhaul, the Windwan is also given an annual safety inspection.
Let's get to some feedback before the news at 6. On Wellington's Golden Mile. Now, this is the plan to make part of the area pedestrian only. This listener says, big supporter of the plans for Wellington. Those roads aren't high traffic routes anyway. I look forward to enjoying a more walkable city. Mary's got in touch, though, raising some concerns about other people travelling by wheels that aren't cars. The Golden Mile will become anything on wheels other than cars, she says. What about us pedestrians who are already in danger of serious injuries from bikes, scooters and skateboards? On the subject of eggs, now this is MPI has put a no movement ban on a North Island egg farm because the farm has tested positive for salmonella. They can't name exactly the egg brands. They're across a number of different brands. This person says, this disclosure is nonsense. Thousands of people will be up buying eggs tomorrow in their end-of-week shopping. If there are more than one brand they are being marketed under, they should be named. I won't be buying eggs tomorrow. Are those dodgy eggs free range or what? Followed by 5 or 6 exclamation marks. On the subject of washing your eggs before you eat them, this person says, never wash them with water. Shells are porous.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. There are plans to open hundreds more COVID-19 vaccination centres over the next few weeks as the rollout is extended to the bulk of the population. The government's revealed its plans for Group 4, the 2 million New Zealanders under 65 deemed at lowest risk from the virus. They will be prioritised by age, starting with over 60s from the end of July through to over 35s in September, with everyone else from October. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says there are now up to 150 vaccination sites, but there'll eventually need to be 850.
We're now preparing to ramp up to around 350,000 doses a week, and on some days at the peak of the delivery, that will be up to 70,000 doses a day.
Ashley Bloomfield says there will also be vaccinations events at stadiums. Community members on Stewart Island are being tested after a child received an indeterminate test result for COVID-19. A local childcare centre is being closed for the rest of the week and possible local contacts are being asked to isolate. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says health authorities are investigating the potential case, but say it's most likely the child is not infected. Their family have tested negative for COVID-19. Dr Bloomfield says further results are due later today. Team New Zealand sailor Blair Tuke wants to defend the America's Cup in New Zealand. The government offer of about $99 million to host the next America's Cup in Auckland was turned down by Team New Zealand. The organisation is now looking at possible offshore destinations to defend the Cup, and Tuke says he understands why.
We love the time sailing here and the Cup and seeing how Kiwis enjoyed it, and I know everyone's been working incredibly hard to try and keep it here again. That would be the first choice, but we're also very aware of how challenging it is to hold an event like the America's Cup in these times.
Locations in the United Kingdom, Middle East and Asia are being suggested to host the 37th America's Cup. A Wellington City councillor who has championed alternative transport says the city's got to change with the times. A car ban will come into place for the Golden Mile route from Courtney Place to Lambton Quay by the Beehive. Many businesses argue taking out cars in car parks won't work, but Tamitha Paul says it will encourage people to look for other ways of getting around.
I think we need to actually just get it going and show people in practice that it works and just rip the Band-Aid off.
Tamitha Paul says the changes to the Golden Mile should take about 2 years to complete. The developers of a controversial marina on Waiheke Island say the Environment Court has authorised the project. Opponents believe the development puts little blue penguins at risk, and 3 were arrested today for trespass after workers with a digger began removing rocks to drill into the seabed. Kennedy Point Boat Harbour Director Kit Littlejohn says the work poses no risk to Korora. He says the project has complied with all construction standards and he's certain no harm will come to the penguins. Food safety officials have stopped a third North Island egg producer from selling eggs after tests found a strain of the potentially dangerous bacteria Salmonella. New Zealand Food Safety has been carrying out tracing and testing of poultry operations after Salmonella was found at an Auckland hatchery earlier this year. Last month, NZ Food Safety stopped 2 farms from selling eggs after tests found Salmonella. The Director of Food Regulation, Dr Paul Danstead, says no eggs have tested positive, but the agency is being cautious. The ban will stay in place until officials are sure the eggs are safe. The Human Rights Tribunal has been told the government is discriminating against disabled children in schools. Advocacy group the IHC made the claim in a statement lodged with the tribunal today. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The statement of claim says disabled students are treated differently from other school children and are often denied the same access to education. Some do not get to stay in class all day and some are excluded from certain school activities. It says that's discrimination and breaches the Human Rights Act. The IHC has brought the case against the Attorney-General on behalf of the Education Minister and Ministry. It says it's been trying for years to get the claim heard, and a legal decision earlier this year cleared the way for it to go ahead.
The Civil Aviation Authority is working with the manufacturer of the helicopter that crashed in Canterbury, leaving 4 people in hospital. Newlyweds Faye Alahanafe and Mahdi Zugab, photographer Rachel Jordan and the pilot were all seriously injured when the Robinson 44 crashed at Terrace Towns Resort west of Christchurch on Saturday. The CAA says the helicopter's engine appears to have completely lost power just after takeoff. A spokesperson says it has requested help in its investigation from the helicopter and engine manufacturers Robinson and Lycoming. It's 5 minutes past 6. The Blues have suffered a double blow ahead of their Trans-Tasman Super Rugby final against the Highlanders in Auckland on Saturday night. All Black prop Ofa Tu'ungafasi will miss the game due to a knee injury that needs surgery. Tu'ungafasi missed the side's win over the Western Force last week, but it had hoped he would be right for the final. Also missing is loose forward Tom Robinson, who was concussed in the win over the Western Force. He's been replaced in the starting lineup by Akira Ioane. Meanwhile, the Highlanders have included lock Pari Parkinson and winger Jonah Nareki in their starting lineup. The pair were under injury clouds but have been declared fit to play. The match will be co-captained by Ash Dixon's 100th game for the Highlanders. Despite missing out on the Tokyo Games, Olympic silver medalist Sarah Walker isn't ready to give up on BMX. National champion Rebecca Petch has claimed New Zealand's only BMX spot for Tokyo. Walker missed the 2016 Rio Games through injury, having won a silver medal at the London Olympics in 2012. She's now contemplating her competitive future as she'll be 36 by the time the Paris Olympics comes around.
My new dream would be to hand out the medals for the BMX race. It'd be very, very special to award medals to the girls I've been competing against for a long time. And who knows, maybe Rebecca's one of the people I get to hand a medal to, and that would be a very special life moment as well.
That's the news.
Mātangi Reia, a revealing series where former Māori MPs open up about their time in Parliament.
I knew then, on March the 6th, the very next day, I knew that day that there would be a Māori party. I would be the candidate for Taitokero, and I would be going to Parliament.
Watch or listen to Mātangi Reia, Māori Political Legacies. Find it at rnz.co.nz/Mātangi Reia or on the podcast and series page.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country. Showers easing tonight, clearing tomorrow. Areas of fog inland overnight. Rain setting into Northland from tomorrow afternoon onwards and to Taranaki at night, with possible thunderstorms for Northland. Bay of Plenty, partly cloudy. Isolated showers in the west, clearing tonight. Fog inland overnight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay fine, apart from showers about the ranges tonight. Cloudier about Hawke's Bay tomorrow with isolated showers. Whanganui to Wellington and Wairarapa, partly cloudy with occasional showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, a few showers about northern Westland until tonight, otherwise fine. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, showers, possibly heavy with hail. Snow to 800 metres, gradually clearing tomorrow but remaining cloudy about Canterbury. Chatham Islands, showers. RNZ National. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā, e hono mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A team of COVID testers have travelled to Rakiura, Stewart Island, after a child who lives there returned a weak positive result after having a pre-departure test ahead of overseas travel. The rest of the family returned negative tests, and so did the child when they were retested. Now, health officials are waiting on the results of serology tests to rule out an old infection, but they suspect the weak result could be a false positive. But as a precaution, a childcare centre has now been closed, and the Director General of Health says because Rakiura's an isolated community, they need some reassurance, and the DHB has mobilised a testing team. Community Board Chair John Spraggan explains what's happening on the island.
The health authorities are over here on the island doing community testing today and tomorrow morning. They're doing all the young children and anyone that's feeling unwell or who would like a test.
So who's turned up there, John, and whereabouts are they right now?
At the moment, the testing is being done at our local community centre, and basically, from what I understand, is that they were testing all the young children from the local preschool and the immediate family and things, and anyone else that would like a test.
So I'm taking, there's just the one childcare centre there?
There is, yes.
And about how many kids do you reckon, John, on the island?
There's probably 50-odd young children, in the primary school and at the preschool.
So have is the centre or anything else been closed down for the day?
The centre is shut down for the rest of the week. And, I know that I was at the community office in our library this morning, and it was being completely, cleaned and sterilised. So the steps are all being taken, but hopefully it's nothing, yeah.
You're quite a small community, so, is everyone kind of a contact, or how's it being treated?
It's very easy to contact people if they need to. I found out this morning by accident, and at that stage there was really no conversation in the community. But since I've come down here this afternoon, it is being talked about a little bit, but no one's stressed, if you can understand what I mean.
Yeah, so
we would hate to see it come to the island, as any community would.
In terms of the community, because it is so small, how likely is it that, you, for example, have had contact with the family? Pretty much everyone, could have, couldn't they?
Well, yeah, in theory. Yeah. The island's fairly close-knit community, but...
So have close contacts been identified by health officials?
I believe they have been.
Okay. So it would, as you say, be terrible if it reached the island. What are people's concerns?
Yeah, we know. It's something that we've been concerned about right from day one, and we've taken all the steps to prevent it. And, we would hate to see it get here.
So, John, have you been for the old cotton bud up your schnoz yet?
I had it some time ago. I haven't been this time. What they're particularly after this time is anyone that's feeling, a little bit off colour or not 100%, and they're the ones that they're really encouraging to go to there.
In terms of vaccinations, John, what's the feeling there? Because obviously the government is announcing its further rollout plans for the vaccine. What are you hearing about how the island's going to be? How's the island going to be treated?
In relation to the vaccination, the island, we've got a very senior population here, and it's been a little bit of disappointment that basically no one on the island has had COVID, any of the inoculation yet.
None of the older residents?
None of the olders. There's a couple got it just the other day, and one or two others have received emails to have appointments. It was hoped that they would come to the island and do it because it's pretty expensive for people to have to go to town to have it, and the suggestion is that they should stay overnight.
So, John, as far as you know, the very few people who have been vaccinated on the island...
There are very few that have been at the moment, yeah.
Did they get vaccinated on the island, or...?
No, they did not.
Okay.
They got vaccinated at Invercargill.
Do you know yet what the government's plans are, whether they're going to come to you?
I have heard, and it's only a rumour, that they are coming here in August.
So, best case scenario, what do you want to happen in terms of the vaccine rollout on the island?
I would love to see them come earlier rather than later, in particular for, the over 65, the over 70s, and anyone working, we've got ferry staff here, we've got airline staff here who are working with customers all the time. It'd be good to think that they had been vaccinated.
Could you hazard a guess, John, at what percentage of the population is over 65 there?
Well, I was at a Christmas party yesterday, a mid-year one, and I think there's about 100 out of our 400.
Right, and very few have been vaccinated so far?
Very few.
Are you keen to get the jab, John?
I am, yes.
And what's the general feeling on the island, you reckon?
The majority of people, I think, are keen to get it.
And that was John Spraggan joining us from Rakiura Island, Stewart Island there, where there's a bit of testing going on after a small child returned a week positive. It is almost 15 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A woman accusing Arthur Allen Thomas of indecently touching her on multiple occasions says his false imprisonment felt like the appropriate punishment for what he did to her. Mr. Thomas, famously pardoned over the unsolved crew murders, is now on trial for historical sexual assault. John Bond reports from the Manukau District Court.
Today, the second of two complainants gave evidence in a closed court, watching a recorded video of her police interview and then answering questions from lawyers. The woman has name suppression. She said some years ago, Arthur Allen Thomas indecently touched her and made her touch him. She didn't tell anyone for years and coped with the trauma by binge drinking. Mr. Thomas's 9 years of wrongful imprisonment in the 1970s were enough for her. Her comments in court have been voiced.
The 9 years, I thought that was punishment for doing that to me.
Later, the woman and her husband sought a meeting with Mr. Thomas's lawyer, hoping to receive a full apology.
They tried to make us out to be extortionists. We never mentioned money. We had no reason to go there other than to solve it. Money didn't come into it.
The woman said no apology came, and then for her, the final straw, a petition asking police to apologise to Mr. Thomas over the crew murders, while she had never had an apology herself.
The reason I'm here today is because it's reared its ugly head again.
Another woman has also accused Mr Thomas of raping and indecently assaulting her. Both complainants said other people witnessed the incidents. Mr Thomas strongly denies the allegations, and his lawyer, Marie Dyberg QC, said the incidents never happened and the women have an interest in getting money out of him.
It is almost 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 3 people opposing the controversial Kennedy Point marina development were arrested today. Protesters who say a marina endangers a nearby little blue penguin habitat have been occupying the beach near the development site on Waiheke Island for about 4 months. The developer, on the other hand, says no harm will come to the korora. Te Arawa Rollston has the story.
Marina opponents have vowed to remain on the Pūtiki Point site despite losing a lengthy court battle challenging the resource consents. They say workers with a digger began removing rocks today in order to drill into the seabed. As people occupied the site, a large police presence arrived to allow work to go ahead. Inspector Dave Hines from Auckland City Police says they recognise the right to lawful protest and the right to conduct lawful business. 3 people were arrested in relation to trespass. Kylie Matthews, Deputy Chairperson of the Waiheke Local Board, says people are distressed and concerned about the plight of the korora.
We will stand in support of the protectors, and we still have that view to this day, and we also have shown that we are not going to be enacting or supporting of any removal of the occupation which has been down here for 90 days.
Around 60 people from the Waiheke community were out in force today. Members of the Green Party and Forest and Bird have also voiced their support. The developer is Kennedy Point Boat Harbour, and its director, Kit Littlejohn, says the work poses no risk to the penguins. Some of that work can't start until the council and Kennedy Point agree to a penguin management plan. Mr Littlejohn says the developers have complied with all construction standards.
Korora don't generally swim around in the bay during the day. They come and go from their burrows at dawn and dusk, but during the day, if they're there, they're usually deeply buried under the rocks at the top of the breakwater.
A native bird expert also objects to the construction. Karen Saunders from Waiheke Native Bird Rescue says there are a number of threats putting the penguins at risk.
Oh, the feeling's awful. I feel incredibly sad because I work really closely with penguins. I see what they're like. When they're scared or they're in a state of terror, they freeze or they'll try to ram themselves into the rocks further. So they're probably causing themselves damage in there right now today. So the emotion of that is really distressing.
Protesters have vowed to occupy the site despite a recent Supreme Court decision going against them. They say they're worried about the effect of any work on the rocks below sea level on the bird's habitat. Meanwhile, the developer has agreed to pause any work above sea level, pending on an agreed penguin plan. To carry out further work, they will need a plan approved by the Auckland Council.
Let's give you a bit of a traffic update now. On Auckland Southern Motorway, there's been a crash southbound right by the Ellerslie-Panmure on-ramp. It's blocked the right southbound lane. So emergency services are on site and people are being asked to pass the scene with care and expect delays through the area. To Australia now, where more than 2 million workers are set for a pay rise in a move that split workers and bosses. The country's Fair Work Commission will lift the minimum wage by 2.5%, but is delaying the move for some industries. Here's the ABC's Stephen Schubert.
For Geelong supermarket worker Donna Richards, any lift in the national minimum wage is good news.
It helps me with everyday living expenses. Everything goes up in price except people's wages. Well, some people's wages anyway.
For the first time, the annual amount a worker on the minimum wage will earn in a year is more than $40,000. Donna Richards says the increase will help, but it's still hard to live on.
Every week something comes up, and if you've got a basic wage, it's kind of like being in a rut. You're just stuck.
The Australian Council of Trade Unions had been calling for a pay rise of 3.5%, while the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Australian Industry Group suggested 1.1%. The National Farmers Federation and supermarket lobby group Master Grocers Australia argued there should be no increase to the minimum wage. The Morrison government didn't nominate a specific number, but urged a cautious approach which would prioritise keeping workers in a job. While the pandemic has hit the tourism and hospitality industries hard, others, like retail giant Harvey Norman, have posted record-breaking profits. Business groups say the superannuation rate is also scheduled to increase by 0.5% in July, and that, along with the new pay rise, needs to be found somehow.
There comes a point where the cost has to be passed on to the consumer.
Paul Aaron owns the Mary Street Bakery in Perth, which employs 150 people across 6 sites. He says he understands the need for a pay rise for his workers, but the cost of his raw materials and rent has also increased.
We try to wear most of the rises and we have done for the majority of the time, but at the moment we're finding it harder to.
The decision by the Fair Work Commission won't come into effect straight away for some workers. Much of the retail sector won't receive a pay rise until September, while people in aviation, fitness and tourism will have to wait until November. That's because of the ongoing impact the pandemic has had on business confidence. Independent economist Nikki Hutley says the Australian economy has bounced back from the pandemic much faster than most people expected, and that means there is scope for a modest pay increase.
It's a good and sensible number, perhaps a little bit more than employers might have been asking for and a little bit less than the union movement had been looking for, so a nice compromise in the middle.
The Fair Work Commission says the potential for future COVID outbreaks and the pace of the vaccine rollout are the major risks for the Australian economy.
Scientists in the UK have warned government officials that the country is shockingly unprepared for the effects of climate change. The Climate Change Committee is predicting more severe heat waves and intense rain than previously thought. The BBC's David Shookman reports.
Wildfires striking more often as droughts intensify. Floods hitting more homes as temperatures rise and rainfall becomes heavier. And travel disrupted by heat waves, as happened 2 years ago. The government's advisors say the UK is not ready for the impacts of climate change.
We only have to look back to last summer when we had 6 days in August when temperatures in the southeast were 10 degrees above normal. I mean, that's extraordinary, and that's impacts of climate change hitting us now in the UK. And it's going to get worse.
The most acute risk, they say, is homes overheating. In the worst cases, this can even lead to deaths. This new flat is one of many with big windows and stunning views, but temperatures that can shoot up inside. So the tenants ended up paying for air conditioning, the only option while having to work at home.
I think it's like something we haven't really considered. We're always thinking about flats that get too cold in winter, but actually there's more flats now, especially among new builds, that get too hot in summer, and on very sunny days we even had the windows open in December.
Planting more trees is one way to try to keep some homes a bit cooler, but the challenge of rising temperatures goes far beyond that. The report says that climate change is happening faster than previously thought, and that efforts to adapt to it are falling way behind. And for that, the committee blames the government. The advisors warn that the power network will be more at risk from new extremes of weather, just as all our cars are meant to go electric. And the millions of trees being planted to soak up carbon dioxide could be undermined in a hotter climate. So, how does the government respond to this? Well, no minister is available, we're told. Instead, a statement says the UK was the first major world economy to set a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And we welcome this report and will consider its recommendations closely. The advisors say the risks from climate change are escalating all the time. So they're hoping there'll now be rapid moves to make the country safer.
Black Caps bowling coach Shane Jurgensen says spin bowler Ajaz Patel is right in the frame to play the World Test Championship final against India. Patel's played just 9 tests since debuting in 2018, 6 of them overseas with local conditions less suited to spin. Jurgensen told our sports reporter Barry Guy Patel bolted into contention by taking 4 wickets last weekend.
What we found in previous games and like at Lords, that I think we may need to look at other options to consider taking wickets. We saw the pitch at Lords was quite dry. and we sort of went with that attack for that particular game. We went to Edgbaston, and there was a good opportunity. That was certainly a drier pitch than probably Lords. And it basically, as England does, create opportunities for things to change very quickly. So in Edgbaston, there was a couple of really hot days, which made that wicket play into Ajaz's hand. He just bowled beautifully. So, I've been really happy with his progress. He loves cricket. He loves his game and has really got a nice little handle on his game at the moment. There's a nice, quiet confidence about him.
With the fact that a draw is a share of the title, is there even more a conservative approach to this in some way when it comes to selections?
I don't think anything like that is being considered. I think from our viewpoint, everything that's been discussed from us, and it's been a consistent approach, is that we want to win the game. When the decisions are finally made with Kane and Gary and they're playing 11, which actually could happen right up until the morning of the game yet, which is still a long way away. So I think it all goes towards us having the best performance and looking to win. So there's no doubt they'll be looking to play the 11 that we want to, they want to play.
Rahana, I think it was today, came out and said he feels that the Indian batsmen need to express themselves. Are you expecting teams to sort of, especially when they're batting, perhaps, to sort of go on the attack, or are you expecting something slightly different to, mini tests?
Oh, I think there's certainly some dangerous players, no doubt, in the Indian cricket team. Oh, they're a fantastic team, no doubt, for a long period of time. We've had some fantastic challenges with them and games with them against them over the years, some good wins. And there's certainly some players in their lineup that are extremely dangerous. I mean, someone, obviously, the wicketkeeper in Pant is a dangerous batter that could change the game in the course of an hour or a session. In England, if you get a bit of a partnership going, you can actually score runs quite quickly. And I think that's certainly from our side of the fence. We have had our initial discussions, and we'll be coming up with and finalising our bowling plans to counteract any form of attack from them. So that's going to be really crucial in this game.
The World Test Championship starts in Southampton tomorrow night, weather permitting. Some showers are forecast. Bit of viewer feedback before we head off. This is on cross-country races for senior high school students. The girls run 4Ks, the boys 6, and there is a call in some quarters to, even up the distances. Everybody runs 6Ks. This listener says, no, leave it as it is. Anything to get away with not having to run further. Katie is a reluctant school runner of the 70s and 80s and says, my 11-year-old daughter is protesting. She doesn't want the boys thinking that they're better than her. Someone else says, if we extend cross-country distances for girls, they could drive girls away. Maybe we could give the boys a break and decrease their distance to the same as girls. That could attract more boys to the event, says Sue. Why don't we just give them both the option of running 4 or 6Ks. And this person says, surely the female runners will girl-cot, not boycott the cross-country, they say. Thanks for all your feedback this evening. Now, don't forget to tune in to First Up tomorrow morning. They're with you from 5 in the morning. Early birds they are. They're going to be looking at the whopping 454% increase in Trade Me searches for electric vehicles this week. Clearly, it's got you all revved up. Don't forget to check out our stories online. Ke te hoki mai anō a popo whānau, po Mario. We're back tomorrow, same time. It's Friday. Yay!
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. There are plans to open hundreds more COVID-19 vaccination centres over the next few weeks as the rollout is extended to the bulk of the population. Community members on Stewart's Island are being tested after a child received an indeterminate test result for COVID-19. Team New Zealand sailor Blair Tuke wants to defend the America's Cup in New Zealand. Food safety officials have stopped a third North Island egg producer from selling eggs after finding a strain of the potentially dangerous bacteria Salmonella. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The proposal is to take general traffic off the Golden Mile, so over the whole of the Golden Mile we'll be increasing footpath space by 75%.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
I think we could see a point in the future where we can avoid staying in quarantine for vaccinated people, but we're just not there yet in terms of the evidence base.
Up to date if you're up late.